Hi there, Brett Hornby here with a Calgary Sports video as a Calgary Sports fan. This time we're talking about Calgary Flames, and more specifically with the moves they made behind the bench in letting Glen Gulutzan go with Dave Cameron and Paul Gerard, and bringing in Bill Peters, who most recently coached the last 4 seasons with the Carolina Hurricanes. Well, first, I don't disagree with the move in letting Glen Gulutzan go after having a first season as head coach. Turned the season around and got the team in the playoffs. Unfortunately, losing 4 straight to the Anaheim Ducks in the first round, the expectations were risen because after Glen Gulutzan was brought in to replace Bob Hartley, the players seemed to like him a lot more because he was more of a player's coach, where Bob Hartley was a little more of a tougher hard ass. The players seemed to warm up to him a lot more, and the expectations were risen this past season by bringing in Travis Hamonic to bolster the top 4, and even though they weren't really sold on Brian Elliott, they brought in Mike Smith to stabilize the starting goaltending position, so expectations were a lot higher. But unfortunately, this team regressed big time in a lot of categories and didn't win much at home, which, if you have to figure, someone would have to take the blame. And the first easy blame is always the head coach, which I don't disagree with the move that they made in relieving Glen Gulutzan and his staff. The other scenario I could have saw was him staying for one more season as head coach, but not retaining the assistants because they were in charge of our special teams. But figured that maybe if you're going to make a change anyway, you might as well wipe the slate clean. Then comes Bill Peters, and based on what I read online, a lot of people don't seem to like this move as much because Bill Peters hasn't had much of a hasn't had any playoffs experience. But he has done enough experience and he's won at various levels. That's when I go over my notes here, that I like this move in terms of what he's offered, in terms of his personality, which I think he's less of a player's coach than Glen Gulutzan was, but he's not as much of a hard ass as Bob Hartley is. I think he's the right mix for what this team needs to get going to the next level in terms of not only getting into the playoffs, but possibly going somewhere in the playoffs and winning a round or two. But let's bring my notes here to compare both Glen Gulutzan and Bill Peters from their times as head coach in the NHL and their careers leading up to being ultimately the head coach for their various teams. So first with Glen Gulutzan here, the first season with the Calgary Flames was in 2016-17. He led them to a 45-33-4 record, which was good enough to make the playoffs as the first wild card. But as I mentioned, got swept in the first round by the Anaheim Ducks. This past season, 2017-18 season, we definitely regressed a lot, big time. He only amassed a record of 37-35-10 by missing the playoffs, and by a pretty margin of 11 points, which that's 6 wins you needed that we didn't pick up. And a lot of that could be attributed to our power play being close to the bottom of the league and not winning at home. I mean, it used to be, especially during the 04 playoff run and seasons after it, the Sea of Red, Calgary was a tough place to play, and a lot of teams didn't want to play in Calgary, but we seem to have lost that the last few years. But this wasn't Glen Gulutzan's first stop as an NHL coach, because he first got his job with the Dallas Stars organization, and I think he did an okay job with the Dallas Stars, a less talented team, because his only playoff appearance as a head coach was with the Calgary Flames. But his first season with Dallas, he was back in 2011-12. He led the Stars to a 42-35-5 record, not making the playoffs. And then 2012-2013, that was the lockout shortened season. He led them to a 22-22-4 record, which is win-losses overtime or shootout loss record. So overall, in his NHL career, he's 146, 125, and 23, which I'd say would be good enough if there was the right opportunity. That I think Glen Gulutzan could be a head coach again in the NHL. He's still a young coach. I think he's only 46, 47, and he's worked with a few other as an assistant as well. So I still think he has a future to being a head coach, and there's even rumors that the Edmonton Oilers might decide to add him as an assistant with Todd McLellan. So he'll definitely be back in the NHL. Now with Bill Peters, he actually lasted 4 seasons as head coach with the Carolina Hurricanes, never making the playoffs, but I figured that they didn't have as good of a team and good of goaltending that he's going to have better of that here in Calgary for the 2018-19 season. But his first season in Carolina, which was 2014 and 15, and this was his worst record. He was 30, 41, and 11. And then the next season, in 15-16, he was 35, 31, and 16. And then the next season, 2016-17, he was 36, 31, and 15. And then this past season, 2017-18, he was 36, 35, and 11. And I say the last 2 years, Carolina was actually knocking on the door at one point on getting into the playoffs. And they have, much of this time, they have subpar goaltending and younger forwards who aren't as talented as Gaudreau and Monahan here in Calgary with Matthew Tkachuk. So I that's where I like this hiring in terms of what this team needs. So overall, Bill Peters' record as head coach, he's 137, 138, 53. So 1 game under 500, no playoffs. But I still like what this guy offers in terms of his personality. And if you watched his press conference when he was introduced as head Calgary, as head coach, I think you would agree that we should give this guy a chance. And I like what he offers. And as when I read his past, you would definitely be intrigued on if he was given a better team to work with, he could replicate that success here in the NHL. So before the NHL, let's get back to Glen Gulutzan here. He did not play in the NHL, or he was not drafted in the NHL. He actually played in the Western Hockey League first with I know he played with the Saskatoon Blaze, the Moose Jaw Warriors, and the Brandon Wheat Kings. But the most professional hockey he played with the Fresno Falcons, the Utah Grizzlies, and Las Vegas Thunder, which are, minor pro leagues. So that's all he has for playing experience. But then in terms of coaching and managing, he actually got his teeth, started getting his feet wet and grinding his teeth with the ECHL Las Vegas Wranglers as head coach and manager, which at that time was actually affiliated with the Calgary Flames as their farm team for the AHL team. And during his time with the Las Vegas Wranglers, he actually led them to one Calgary Cup appearance, which is their finals. Didn't win, but every year he was successful, including winning Coach of the Year in, I think it was 2005-2006 in the ECHL, which then he got hired up to the AHL Texas Stars, which is the Dallas Stars affiliate. In 2 seasons there, he actually led them to a Calder Cup final, which then brought the attention to the Dallas Stars to bring him in as head coach to replace Mark Crawford at the time. So I still say he's got a quite impressive resume from rising up to the NHL, and in between his time with the Dallas Stars and the Calgary Flames, he actually was an assistant coach of the Vancouver Canucks, working both with John Tortorella for a season, and he also got to work with Mike Sullivan, who they weren't a great fit at the time in Vancouver. Now Tortorella's coaching with Columbus, and Mike Sullivan coaching with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and since he's taken over the Pittsburgh Penguins, they've only won 2 Stanley Cups, so he's learned with those 2 guys. And even after when Vancouver decided to let Tortorella go, Mike Sullivan's been his right-hand man, but he kept Glen Gulutzan, and then he worked 2 seasons with Willie Desjardins. So he had a taste of playoff hockey under Willie Desjardins in 2015 when the Canucks took on the Calgary Flames. So I still figure the future is bright for Glen Gulutzan, and he might come back as head coach, but he'll definitely be on someone's staff, maybe as soon as next season. Now let's move on to Bill Peters. Bill Peters, he took a different path. He, like Glen Gulutzan, did not play in the NHL, or has never been in the NHL as a player, but he made some interesting connections when he played. He played in the ACAC, which is the Alberta College's Athletic Conference, which I'm definitely familiar with that, being a St. alumni and a St. Trojan fan. But he played for the Augustana Vikings, and he also played with the Red Deer College Kings, who were back at that time. He won the championship with a guy named Mike Babcock as head coach, because I know Mike Babcock got his coaching start with the ACAC of all leagues, and this is where Mike Babcock is going to come into the picture a few times when he's rising up the ranks here. And then after his college days, he got his first start as coach and manager with Killam's Junior B team. Being that he's an Alberta boy, he worked with the Junior B team. And then I saw on Wikipedia that he moved to San Antonio, Texas for his wife's nursing job. And when he was in Texas, he started building the first rink for hockey there. And every summer he had his coaching clinic, coaching school, hockey school. So that's how he definitely got his name out there and tried to make connections, which eventually led to being an assistant coach with the Spokane Chiefs WHL junior team, and he was an assistant with them from 1997 to 2002, and then which led to his first head coaching position, which was with CIS, the University of Lethbridge Longhorns, and he was the head coach there from 2002 to 2005 before coming back to the Spokane Chiefs, this time as head coach, and he was there for 3 seasons, including 2008, where he led the Spokane Chiefs to a Memorial Cup, which is quite impressive, where you have to win the league title first to get in the Memorial Cup. And in the Memorial Cup, you play the WHL champion, the host, and the Ontario Hockey League champion, and the QMJHL champion. And they say the Memorial Cup is actually a lot tougher to win than the Stanley Cup. So he definitely has some championship category early. And then after he led the Spokane Chiefs to the Memorial Cup, he rose up the ranks again to the AHL, where he was the head coach of the Rockford Ice Hogs from 2008 to 2011, who at that time they were affiliated with the Chicago Blackhawks. And from there he coached a few players that were members of the Chicago Blackhawks team that won the Stanley Cup in 2010 and 2013. And then after coaching the Rockford Ice Hogs, Mike Babcock, once again, Mike Babcock in the picture, brings him on as an assistant with the Detroit Red Wings. And he served as an assistant for 3 seasons with the Detroit Red Wings, gaining playoff experience. And if Mike Babcock is looked at as one of the best coaches in the league, definitely not a bad guy to learn from, once again, from his Red Deer College days. Mike Babcock Bill Peters was his right-hand man under the Detroit Red Wings before he got the Carolina Hurricanes job. And the other times that Bill Peters has worked with Mike Babcock was the recent World Cup of Hockey for Team Canada. And then speaking of Team Canada, he's right now in Denmark coaching Team Canada at the World Hockey Championships. So I say, when you fall from the Mike Babcock coaching tree, there's definitely some credibility there, and I figure he can pass on some of that experience, and plus experience from coaching in Carolina, to help the Calgary Flames and get them back in the right direction, which I still say the future is bright. So that's where I go back to why I like this hire. I mean, we needed to make a change, not for the sake of change, but when you don't meet expectations, there's going to have to be changes. And the other thing that also sticks with me is that I mentioned that he coached 4 seasons with the Carolina Hurricanes. And Calgary's seems to have gone through a lot of coaches, and since Bob Johnson, who was the second head coach of the Calgary Flames history after Al McNeil when they moved from Atlanta, he lasted 5 seasons as head coach, who I personally think is the best coach the Flames have ever had. And the reason why he left the Calgary Flames was to take a coaching job with the USA Hockey before he went to the Pittsburgh Penguins. That Bob Hartley, the guy who Glen Gulutzan replaced, was the only coach since Bob Johnson to have lasted more than 3 seasons as head coach for the Calgary Flames. So the Carolina Hurricanes must have saw highly of him to keep him on for 4 seasons. And in fact, if he wanted to, he could have still been coach this year, but he felt it was best for the team, and who knows what kind of situation he would have had, because right now Carolina is in flux with the management team, where they've recently got a new owner, and recently Ron Francis was let go, so they're looking for a new general manager. And usually sometimes when a new general manager comes in, he wants to bring his own head coach. So he left $1.6 million on the table, which I'm going to assume that that's how much the Calgary Flames will pay Bill Peters as head coach of the Calgary Flames. But anyway, I'm just interested in what your take on this hiring, this change. Was it a good move, bad move, indifference? Only time will tell when the off season happens with the draft, the free agency, any trades that are made. I mean, ultimately, it's the players on the ice that make the goals, saves, hits, whatever. But maybe this is the right guy for the job in terms of personality, philosophy. I think we're gonna have a similar position. So anyway, hit like and subscribe if you enjoy what I say, and see you in the next video.